From our perspective, we recognise the huge economic and social benefit that AI has brought. It's been really important, particularly in tough times. We all lived through a pandemic where we know that the ability to apply AI in a way to find, for instance, new vaccines, that was literally a lifesaver. We know in the Australian context it can add a lot to our GDP, so we want to get the best of AI while also thinking about how to manage risk. So from our perspective, what we're looking at is introducing a risk-based framework, low, medium, high. We're consulting with people right now in the Australian context around that. And I think there's a balancing act about where we can work with other countries to harmonise our legislative approach, but where there are clearly differences of take, like we'll localise as well to conform or to satisfy local desire about putting those type of guardrails in. So it's not a heavy-handed approach. It'll look at the higher risk areas and determine with industry and others what's got to be done. But we want to get that balance right. It is an important technology, but clearly people have seen the leaps and bounds, especially around generative AI that's occurred, and want to know that we get that balance right, as I said.
So we're talking about regulation over AI then, are we not?
Well, it's about identifying, I think where there's low and medium risk, I think a lot of that can already be managed in many respects by either the legislation that we've got. We've got about 12 different portfolios that have anticipated the role or the intersection with AI. But where it's higher, we'll potentially need to consider what we do around that. Automated decision making is probably the area that springs to mind, and about how companies set up, and even governments in many respects, automated decision making off an AI base, and thinking that through is really important.
You know, so far, generative AI, ChatGPT, etc. I mean, the uses and also the misuses or failures have been pretty innocuous, if not funny, right? But just a couple of days ago, we were talking to a couple of experts about how the real cutting edge for AI right now is military applications. Let's say drones, which are obviously in use already, and allowing them the ability to make decisions on their own on the battlefield in what's known as the kill chain. In other words, taking the human element out of it. What is Australia's take on this? Because this is, not a lot of people talk about it, but that is really the forefront and the cutting edge of AI right now.
So from my point of view, I have broader responsibility from a civil sense. And clearly, in different countries, defence ministers will be taking that on board. And I think recently, the UN Security Council, from the top of my head, was they'd recently met to consider some of the very points that you raised. And it is a really, and I've watched technology as a parliamentarian for the entire time, over 10 years. And it is a really vexed question that you pose, because at the same time, you don't want to put people in the way, in harm's way. But there's obviously the other thought, the dimension to this around having automated decision making that may act in a way that runs counter to the expectations of how these exercises would work. So getting, again, balance, important there. It's not necessarily in the frame of what we're doing right now and the consultations we're undertaking. It's not really at the heart of that, but there is active consideration, not just in Australia, but world over, about how to manage the intersection of technology and people when it comes to those very decisions, literally life and death decisions.